All right, we're live. Check the mic. Instant reaction for week 12. Wild week 12. Every week's wild, Sam. Maybe no more than this week, though. I mean, this was some of the finishes in the 1:00 games out of this world. You talk about the Vikings winning in overtime against the Bears. Whatever we saw in that Cowboys Commanders game. Where do you want to start? We got to start with at least some of the crazy that was in the 1:00 window.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say maybe the results weren't too crazy, but on the other hand, Will Levis upset CJ Stroud with the Titans
Yeah.
winning, and Dallas actually won that game. I mean, whatever at the back and forth and the craziness, Dallas winning against Washington is itself craziness, let alone how it ended up happening with that absolutely insane fourth quarter. And as you said, the Bears Vikings game, ultimately the Vikings ended up winning that game in overtime, but the fact that it even got to overtime was crazy given how in control Minnesota were for most of that game.
We have some requests to just honor Sam Darnold in this space. I think that's fair. I think that's fair to honor Sam Darnold. It's the 9-2 Vikings, Sam Darnold at the helm. I felt like every time I was looking up, he was chucking it down the field, whether it's to Hawkinson, to Jordan Addison. Justin Jefferson only had the 2 catches, but one big, huge pass interference. But there was some aggressiveness to the Vikings passing attack, and Darnold was making it happen.
He was, and he didn't do too much wrong in that game. And really late in the game, in overtime in particular, he did stand up. He took a bad sack at one point, but then was making plays and was dealing when they needed him. Hawkinson, Addison both came up huge. So yeah, look, this waiting, this feeling that Sam Darnold is eventually going to turn back into a pumpkin and become terrible, it doesn't look like it's happening. I mean, he's had one bad game this season and bounced back pretty conclusively from that one. Sam Darnold looks like he's for real.
And just from a Vikings perspective, I think, there's different ways of looking at this. They maybe gave the Bears some opportunities to get back into it. I think the Bears also had some massive missed opportunities. One of the few times Darnold did put the ball in harm's way, they dropped an interception on third down. They muffed the punt on the very next play. I feel like tomorrow morning show, I don't know if I'm going to have all of the high leverage plays in some of these games because there were so many of them. But from a Minnesota perspective, in a game where they didn't get Justin Jefferson going on the stat sheet, they still got Jordan Addison with some huge plays. TJ Hawkinson with his best game of the season so far. I think just the depth that Minnesota has built on both sides of the ball starting to prove out in this 9-2 record right now.
Yeah, and those are related. Like, I think this is a really good example of a game where a guy who didn't have a statistical impact necessarily in their performance had a huge impact in terms of what he did to the defense. So, there was one third down in particular where the Bears ran like a cover 2, and instead of the corner basically had no interest in anybody other than Jefferson, right? He like jammed him at the line and stayed with him, which gave Jordan Addison a one-on-one free release into the safety on a deep outbreak and route. I mean, that's just free money, right? That was a third down pickup that the Vikings had that probably there's at least a very different coverage or a very different window to throw into if it's not Justin Jefferson that's taking the entire attention away from the corner on that side of the field. That was one play, but that was repeatedly in the game. Like, they were hyper-focused on Justin Jefferson, justifiably so, and that's what opens up space for Jordan Addison, for TJ Hawkinson.
So let's talk a little Cowboys Commanders because, again, we'll go game by game tomorrow morning, full show, check the mic. We review every single game, every single week, right here on the YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcast. Dallas gets the win. Early on, it was like they can't get out of their own way. Blocked field goal, missed field goal, blocked punt. But Washington couldn't really capitalize. And then you get to the end of the game, and it's essentially like, all right, just throw up a prayer for the Commanders, right? Throw up a prayer, see what you could do. They had no chance. They're down by 7, and the prayers answered. What was it? 86 yards to Terry McLaurin. It was wild, and then they missed the extra point. It reminded me. Do you remember the River City relay, Sam? 2003, the Saints and the Jags. They did the pitchy woo woo worked for the Saints. It worked. It was one of the most ridiculous plays of all time. And then the Saints went and missed the extra point. So, they lost the game. That's exactly what happened. One of the most improbable potential finishes in NFL history. And the Commanders missed the extra point.
It was a total special teams implosion. I mean, we talk all the time about your special teams doesn't need to be good. It just needs to not be the reason you lose games. And, Ari Meroff, colleague over here at the 33rd team, had the tweet that The special teams in the Dallas versus Washington game today had a blocked field goal, a blocked punt, 3 missed field goals, 2 missed extra points, a 99-yard kickoff return touchdown, and an onside kickoff return touchdown. Not to mention, the late in the game, we just didn't bother to cover Terry McLaurin play to even let it get to that factor. Just absolute special teams catastrophes all over this game.
It's very annoying, Sam, because we preview every game every single week, and we don't account for that, because how could you, right? Even if you look at special teams rankings and how good kickers are, Fairbairn's over there setting a record for the Texans with his 12th field goal of 50+ yards, and then misses a chip shot to tie it, and that's a big part of why the Texans lost. Just predicting the special teams mishaps or fortunes is challenging. That's why some of these games with some wild finishes. But yeah, so the Tennessee game, Tennessee got the win 32-27. Big part of that's Fairbairn. They're set up for the game tying field goal. This game was back and forth, and the Titans get the win over the Texans.
Yeah, though it was one where Tennessee deserved it. It felt like eventually there was going to be a mistake too many, and maybe Houston would get the win. And you could argue they certainly could or should have late in the game. But the only reason that they had that opportunity was because the Titans gave it to them late on. They deserve to be ahead for most of this game, and I think are reasonable winners for it. They were impressive. They got to CJ Stroud a lot. They caused problems. It was a good Titans performance overall.
In a wild game from Will Levis. I just tweeted out the stat. 30+ yard throws over the last 3 weeks, Sam. Will Levis has 100 more yards than any other QB in the NFL. Nick Westbrook-Akina, again with a 38-yard touchdown, hit another bomb to Calvin Ridley. A fascinating, we love talking about Will Levis, but at one point had only 3 incompletions. One was a pick six, ended up 18 for 24, but he's averaging over 10 yards per attempt. Again, over the last few weeks, hitting the deep balls, but also sacked 8 times, right? So you have this just a ridiculous, weird stat line. We'll break it all down tomorrow, but yeah, signs of life from the Titans, who we've said are a tough team every single week. They play tough, and now that Levis is creating some of those big plays, I think they're even tougher. And the Texans continue to be disappointing, and I think that's a huge story coming out of this for a team that we thought would be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I mean, they made a bunch of mistakes. Just to finish the Will Levis thing, he's now becoming the player that we said he wasn't even earlier on, where he was making all the meme mistakes and wasn't really offering much in the way of big plays to offset that. Now he is. Now he's actually offering quite a lot in terms of production and big plays and positivity. And then, okay, there's a bad play in there where, again, either doesn't see him or just misreads the coverage and thought he was going to go somewhere else, but fires the ball right to a defender for a pick six. Obviously, that's bad, but he now did an awful lot to offset that in the game. It's a different story to what it was earlier in the season, where there was no positivity to offset the really bad plays that he was making. Yeah, the Texans and Stroud, I mean, they're not playing well, and this is the offensive line isn't good, but it's not as bad as it was earlier in the season.
All right, I got another wild statement for you. We're talking Will Levis. We're talking CJ Stroud. Anthony Richardson, the Colts lose to the Lions today. But Bryce Young with another really good game for the Panthers. They lose to the Chiefs. Yeah, they lost 30-27. But Bryce Young with another good game. And you can make the argument, especially since Bryce Young's returned, last 3 games, he's been the most consistent from that class. Richardson probably has the best game, and Levis has done some nice things. Stroud's been very inconsistent, has not played well the last few weeks. Bryce Young has, and I was so impressed. I thought it might run out in this game against Spags and everything. I could not believe some of the plays he made. Again, anticipation, before he's getting hit, before the pressure gets there, anticipation throws that we saw at Bama. Bryce Young doing it again against a really good Chiefs defense.
Yeah, I mean, we've been accused reasonably so, I think, for setting a very low bar of expectations for Bryce Young and kind of praising him just for taking these baby steps forward, pun intended. But it was, a significant step forward because the level of competition, the difficulty level of a Spags defense shot through the roof relative to what we've seen in the last few weeks. And he still looked better. And he didn't make a ton of big mistakes. And he did make a bunch of those A, anticipation throws, B, just good throws sort of under pressure or when things have broken down. He also, again, had one of his best passes result in an incompletion deep down the sideline to Xavier Leggett, if that's what we're calling him, or Leggett. So again, like I felt sorry because the Panthers, their defense played pretty well as well. Like they got to Mahomes a bunch of times. They were able to dial up the blitz on third down and sack him more than you usually see. So I felt like they kind of deserved to get this win, this shock win. And then eventually Mahomes just decided, no, I'm going to make one of those plays that he always makes. The man's inevitable, right? He just makes the key play at the key time, and that's your game. But huge credit to the Panthers as a unit, B, Bryce Young, and C, Dave Canales, who I think continues to improve in terms of putting him in good positions to succeed.
Yeah, and of course the Chiefs deserve credit for surviving, right? I mean, it would have been a bad loss to the Panthers.
Yeah,
Carolina was down 8. They got the 2-point conversion after penalties and the whole thing. Just to make it a game, they give the Chiefs the ball back, and usually when you do that with Mahomes, he's going to come good and has the 32-yard run to set up. That was important too. Set up the game-winning field goal, have a backup kicker with no Harrison Butker. So the Chiefs end up escaping. They've got the Black Friday game coming up. We'll see if Gardner Minshew is healthy for that game. Looks like after the Raiders' loss here, it might be Desmond Ridder there. Bucs were dominant, 30-7 over the Giants. Giants barely even had the ball in the first half. Bucs were unstoppable. 4 different Bucs with rushing touchdowns here in this game.
The Moxie Bowl, only one of the QBs brought the Moxie. Baker, the man's a maniac. He's hilarious to watch. It's fantastic TV. He does like full John Elway into the end zone when they're already up big at that point, I think. Launched himself in there, then does the cutlet celebration of the crowd. Beautiful work. Later on the game, he's like 30 yards downfield, lead blocking for his running back against a host of defenders. Absolute lunacy. Ends up peeling back, actually taking one of them out. Amazing. Like top quality work from Baker. Meanwhile, cutlets, it turns out, didn't fix it. The benching of Daniel Jones didn't do much other than
didn't work. I mean, the Giants offense was so bad, and Malik Neighbors sounded so frustrated in his post-game quotes. We actually might just see Drew Lock this week. I mean, it really might be a 1-week experiment unless they're really hell-bent on we will not pick up any kind of draft position this year, and we're going to, stick with it. But
they said on the broadcast that that Tommy DeVito had told them that he plays every game like it's his last game, and that's not going to change. And for his sake, I think that's probably wise because any game could be his last game the way he's playing.
Any game could be his last game. And then in the 4:00 window, well, I want to talk Packers in a minute here, but the Seattle Seahawks, man, they get the win over the Cardinals. Impressive win against the Cardinals team that had been trending extremely well. Seattle even overcame a few mistakes, but they are now in the lead in the NFC West. And I guess coinciding with that, the Packers destroy the 49ers. As of Thursday, when we recorded our Week 12 preview show, we didn't know that Brock Purdy had a shoulder injury. He goes out to practice that day. They knew he had a shoulder injury, didn't think it was that bad. And I guess it was bad enough that they basically knew on Thursday he's got no shot. They think he's going to play next week against Buffalo. But now you've got the Niners here. Brandon Allen gets the start. The Niners are 5-6. They've got Buffalo next week and Brock Purdy with a bad shoulder. So good for Seattle in first and things collapsing in San Francisco.
I mean, there's not an easy game left on San Francisco's schedule. They go on the road to Buffalo, then they're at home against Chicago and the Rams, then on the road to Miami, home against Detroit, away to Arizona to wrap it up. Like that's a tough schedule every single game, and they need most of them to get into the postseason. So yeah, they're in legitimate trouble now. They put themselves in a hole with some games they should have won earlier, and now they're really up against it because of injuries. I'm starting to develop some serious questions about how San Francisco is evaluating their injuries this year. Remember the McCaffrey thing, right? That was like randomly, oh, look, Christian McCaffrey showed up in the injury report. And then within 2 weeks, he's away in Germany getting like experimental, work done on his knees. Both of them, or his Achilles, both of them apparently are like bilateral tendonitis or both ends of the tendon or whatever it was. Either way, it progressed from like, oh, look, McCaffrey's all of a sudden developed something to like, we're not going to see him for half the year. Then you've got the Brock Purdy stuff. Oh, look, he's battling through a shoulder injury and then immediately overnight goes to actually we shut him down. You were pointing out Brandon Allen shows up to that game with a broken finger that wasn't on the injury report anywhere. I mean, there's some questionable stuff going on there.
Yeah, and I don't know if Brandon Allen's broken finger is a big enough deal to be on the injury report, but they sounded like, hey man, he's having a tough time catching snaps and everything. Got to be careful with. I mean, it sounds significant enough, even if he's not
Right.
missing practice time. Also, Brandon Allen getting the start over Josh Dobbs, who was so good last year on multiple systems, relative to expectations. But yeah, you could just tell there's a tick missing. You mentioned Brandon Allen firing darts over the middle of the field. Doesn't throw the most catchable ball like a Brock Purdy maybe. But look, Packers really took care of business there, and now we have an NFC North with the Lions at 10-1, the Vikings at 9-2, and the Packers at 8-3. We weren't right about a lot of stuff coming into the year, but we were right about the NFC North being absolutely loaded this season.
Yeah, I mean, the three teams at the top certainly don't seem keen on losing very much, and they keep pacing each other. Do we want to talk? I don't want to spend time. We don't have time to talk about it tomorrow too much. Do you want to cover the Daniel Jones thing here while we're at it? Because that went from they benched him, and then within hours it was like, actually they're releasing him.
Well, I mean, there was that report that he was playing safety on offense, which, as Kurt Warner put out there, it's probably just an offensive walkthrough, and you throw a red penny on, and if you're not the starter, you're doing something to help the offense.
It's like when coaches line up, in a
So it's like it's one of those reports that goes viral. That's like, oh man, they're doing him dirty, putting him at safety now. But the bottom line is they made him third string, right? They said you're not playing football here anymore, and then said, okay, we're going to give you your release. And now Daniel Jones goes from, well, we can't win with you, to intriguing pickup for a playoff team and intriguing pickup for teams like the Ravens. Like they come out of the woodwork like, wait, there's a comp pick. There's a comp pick attached to this. We like comp picks. The Ravens are in the mix here as well. So good teams could pick up Daniel Jones right now for the playoff run.
It's a potential comp pick, and it's also, I mean, as bad as Daniel Jones is as a starting franchise option, he's a pretty good backup, and a backup that provides a lot of ways to win because he's got that unusual rushing ability, right? Like, it's not a case of he's the type of backup that a lot of teams would like, because you can construct a game plan around that very quickly, because you can use him on the run and do a bunch of things that are very easy to install without a lot of work, and that can be productive in a critical playoff game. But here's the thing, right? Like, demoting him to third string actually made a lot of sense when you consider why they benched him, right? He was not benched for footballing reasons, even though you can find footballing reasons to bench him. He was benched because they didn't want to guarantee a ton of money if he got hurt. And the way Daniel Jones plays, he would probably get hurt at some point. So at that point, you can't have him as a backup because he might have to go back in the game, right? If you put in Drew Lock and you just swap them over 1-2, and Drew Lock plays, and midway through the first quarter, Drew Lock takes a smack in the side of the head, Daniel Jones has to go back in. So you have to demote him all the way to number 3 if that's the reason for doing it. So up until now, it all makes sense. Then Daniel Jones reportedly goes to John Mara and says, if I'm not the future anymore, free me. Let me be free. Let me go and find my gig somewhere else. That's where they go, okay, yeah, that's a good. I feel I owe it to him. You can't do both of those things, right? Either you owe it to Daniel Jones as the guy, as somebody who's been a good soldier for your team, in which case let him play the rest of the season, or you've determined that actually the best thing for the team is to save the money and not screw around and get rid of him, right? But it cost them money to let him go. So you're either being businessman about it or you're being nice guy about it. You can't do both, because then you just look stupid.
Well, sorry, I didn't check. Where did the cap hit? The cap hit just hits this year instead of next year, right?
Yeah, but it costs them money to get rid of him now than it does to let him to keep him till the end of the year.
Yeah, but it's on this year's cap more than next year's, isn't it?
But either way, it's a worse thing to let, it doesn't do them any good to get him go. It's a nice thing.
How much does it affect the future though? Because if you have the injury issue and you have to pick up his contract next year, that affects next year. That affects next year as far as your cap goes and everything.
So you've benched him, but you've already determined that's not at risk. You're benching him.
But I'm saying doing him a solid by releasing him right now you might pay a little bit more up front, but I don't think that's killing the cap for next year or anything differently in the future.
Right. But you could get rid of him after the season and not risk next year and not risk this year either. Like it's worse than leaving him play out the year.
But the doing him a solid thing is saying, hey, now Brock Purdy has an issue. Go to San Francisco, go to Baltimore, back up Lamar, go to Detroit. Who else was really interested? Who's the other team that was? Minnesota. I mean, go somewhere else and make a playoff run. That's what's doing him a solid.
I know that, but that doesn't help you.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But you still have you still lose the injury risk.
But it costs you money to do that. It costs you the cap. It costs you flexibility. Like there's no benefit to the Giants to do Daniel Jones a solid. None.
So where should he go?
Where should he go?
Where's the best? Like San Francisco, as much as we want to say, hey, they're cooked. Again, everybody in the NFC West is within a game. The Rams are about to play. Everybody's either 5-5, 5-6, or 6-5. That's the entire division. They're all within a game of each other. So they're not done. And if it is a serious shoulder injury, like if Brock Purdy's in Germany on Tuesday, we'll know maybe it's more serious. Is San Francisco actually a spot here?
Maybe. On the other hand, Minnesota, if they were one of the teams that were interested, they are very likely to make the playoffs at this stage. And if they're interested, like Daniel Jones' interest appears to be like, who's going to make the playoffs and have a real run at this, as opposed to who could I potentially play for and, help them out. If he wants to sit on a potential contending team and maybe get a role, the Vikings would be a pretty good spot if they're interested.
I think that would be a good spot. The Vikings also, they were late. Was it the Stephon Gilmore signing that kind of screwed themselves out of a comp pick? I don't know. The comp pick thing is if Daniel Jones gets a reasonable backup contract next offseason, you could get a comp pick in return. So I think any team, if they knew that was going to happen, would want him, while you're also getting that backup security right now. I see people in the chat. The Cowboys already said no. They already said no. But Philly, the Eagles, would he overtake Kenny Pickett as the backup here? And then you get Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley back together in Philly?
I think Saquon will put in a good word.
He'll be like, wait, is he starting or backup? Okay, yeah, as a backup, fine. As a backup, he's good. And like I said, Baltimore too, like you said, they're, if you need Lamar insurance, Daniel Jones can run the ball a little bit, do the design run game stuff. So there's a potential fit there for sure. It'll be intriguing. So we'll have more on Daniel Jones as we know more this week. Anything else you wanted to bring up?
No. Just wanted to cover that because we don't want to spend 10 minutes on it tomorrow.
No, we did it here. The people are disappointed in Tommy Cutlets. We need some sad Godfather music tomorrow or something when we talk about Cutlets. There was no drama or anything. The Bucs were just like, yeah, we're going to drive down, go up 7-0 and just stack touchdowns, and the Giants aren't going to move the ball at all. And then watch out for those Dolphins, man. Dolphins, they coming 5-6, looking like last year's team.
That was the first time their offense, I think, really looked like last year, where they're just like in the zone, looking cocky, like dropping the no look behind the back stuff. Like they just felt like this was early last year Miami Dolphins offense where it was just cooking.
And we, does that work against the better teams and everything? I don't know. They've taken advantage of a stretch here, but man, Tua looks like he's feeling it. They got Jalen Waddle involved for the first time in a while, so. Watch out for the Dolphins at 5-6, looking for that last seed. All right, as always, check the mic. We are full go tomorrow morning. Here's your scheduling notes. On Friday, if you didn't see it already, we talked a little draft with Mike Renner. This week, just 2 shows. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp Eastern time, we'll review all of the Week 12 action. And then the preview show, instead of being on Thursday, that's Thanksgiving this week, preview show drops Wednesday. Same time as our normal Wednesday show, though. So that's 10:30 a.m. this Wednesday. So 2 big shows this week. Of course, 16 games to preview this Wednesday. So it's going to be a big one. Thanks to everybody for tuning in again. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Check the mic.